The news headlines have been sharp recently, haven't they?
They really have.
Especially following that terror attack in Kashmir, you see all this increased activity, Indian and Pakistani warplanes.
Hmm.
It definitely puts the region on edge.
Hmm.
And it makes you think, if things were to escalate, what are the actual aerial capabilities at play here?
It's a critical point.
So for us today, the crucial question is really, what does Pakistan bring to the table in the air? And what does that mean for the delicate balance of power over there?
That's exactly what we need to unpack. And to really get to the heart of it, we have to focus on what's become the primary combat aircraft for the Pakistani Air Force,
Okay.
the JF-17 Thunder. And what's really interesting here is that it's not just a Pakistani project.
Right.
It's actually the result of a pretty significant joint development program with China.
Okay, so for anyone listening, especially maybe those trying to understand the military dynamics in the region, our goal, our mission in this deep dive is really to dissect this JF-17 Thunder. We want to look at its strengths, its weaknesses, particularly in the context of, a potential conflict with India.
Exactly. Cut through the jargon.
Yeah, try and get a clear picture of its strategic significance. And just so everyone knows, our analysis today, it's based on a really insightful piece we read from the National Interest.
A good source for this.
Definitely. So let's start at the beginning. What were the circumstances? Why did they need the JF-17 in the first place?
Well, you have to go back to the 1990s.
Mm.
Pakistan realized then that it had a pressing need, really, to modernize its fleet.
Okay.
They were flying older aircraft like the Mirage, the 3rd V, the F-7s, A-5s. They were just, getting outdated,
Becoming obsolete.
pretty much.
Yeah.
So Pakistan needed a replacement, but crucially, it had to be cost-effective.
The budget constraint.
Always a factor.
Yeah.
And it needed to be multi-role. So capable in air-to-air combat, fighting other planes, but also effective in air-to-ground missions, hitting targets on the surface. Yes. And importantly, there was also this strong desire to sort of lessen their dependence on Western military hardware.
Right. So it wasn't just about getting a new plane. It sounds like more strategic, enhancing their own independence.
Precisely. Strategic autonomy was a big part of it.
Yeah.
And that's really where the partnership with China slots in.
Okay.
By 1999, this collaboration was formalized. And it wasn't just Pakistan buying a plane off the shelf. It was co-development,
So sharing the work.
sharing expertise, technical know-how. It's interesting because the JF-17 actually evolved out of China's Super 7 program.
I think I've heard of that. An older design?
Yeah, it was an attempt to modernize the J-7, which itself was like a Chinese version of the old Soviet MiG-21.
Yeah.
But the JF-17 became something much more advanced, a distinct design really tailored for modern warfare.
And this is where it gets really interesting for Pakistan's own capabilities, isn't it? This wasn't just acquiring an aircraft. It sounds like it gave their domestic defense industry a massive boost.
Oh, absolutely. Huge boost. The Pakistan Air Force facility there in Kamra, it became central to the whole thing. Assembly, and then eventually manufacturing of the JF-17.
Wow.
And this allowed Pakistan to achieve a really significant level of what they call indigenization.
Meaning they make a lot of it themselves.
Exactly. Over 60% apparently of the aircraft's components are now produced locally in Pakistan.
That's substantial.
It is.
Yeah.
And it reduces that dependence on foreign suppliers, less vulnerable to sanctions or supply chain issues.
Makes sense.
So timeline-wise, the first prototype flew back in 2003, and by 2007, they were already in serial production.
Pretty quick turnaround.
Relatively, yeah. And it hasn't stopped there. The JF-17 has seen continuous upgrades. The latest, the Block 3 variant, is a major step up. Significantly enhanced avionics, much better radar systems, improved weaponry. We can get into the specifics later. But this whole partnership with China, it's been crucial not just for Pakistan's aerospace industry, but also, for strengthening their overall relationship and helping Pakistan diversify its military partnerships.
Okay, so we've got the history, the strategic thinking behind it. Now let's dive into what this aircraft can actually do. What are the key technical specs, the capabilities of the JF-17 Thunder?
Okay, so at its heart, the JF-17 is powered by a Russian-designed engine, the Klimov RD-93 turbofan.
Turbofan, right? Like most modern jets.
Yeah, essentially a jet engine with a big fan at the front for better efficiency. This engine lets the JF-17 reach a top speed of about Mach 1.6.
Well, faster than sound.
Oh, yeah. And it gives it a combat range of around 746 miles, roughly.
Yeah. And the design, the wings.
It uses what's called a cropped delta wing configuration. Think of a triangle wing, but with the tips sort of squared off.
What does that do for performance?
Well, the delta wing itself is good for lift and maneuverability at high speeds, important for, air-to-air combat.
Dogfighting.
Right. And the cropped part helps with stability, especially at lower speeds, which is crucial when you're trying to accurately drop bombs or fire missiles at ground targets.
So it's trying to find that balance, being agile, but also stable for attack runs.
Exactly. It's a multi-role design compromise. And the avionics suite, the electronics inside, that's really where the newer Block 3 versions really shine.
Okay, what's the big upgrade there?
A key one is the ASA radar, Active Electronically Scanned Array.
Right, I've heard about ASA. That's the newer radar tech, isn't it?
It is. Instead of a dish physically moving to scan, ASA uses a grid of tiny transmitters that steer the radar beam electronically.
And the advantages.
Much faster scanning, the ability to track and engage, multiple targets simultaneously, better accuracy, and it's much harder for enemies to jam electronically. It's a significant leap in capability.
It sounds like it really boosts its ability to see and react to threats. What about inside the cockpit? What's it like for the pilot?
It's very modern. A glass cockpit.
Meaning screens instead of dials.
Exactly. Multiple digital displays showing information, not the old analog gauges. It has a heads-up display, the HUD.
Projects onto the visor.
That's right. Crucial flight and targeting info right in the pilot's line of sight so they can keep looking outside. Plus, multifunction displays for tactical data and even a helmet-mounted display system.
Where they can aim just by looking.
Potentially, yes. It all adds up to much better situational awareness for the pilot. And for defense, it's got a sophisticated electronic warfare, or EW, suite.
What does that include?
Things like radar warning receivers, tells a pilot if they're being painted by enemy radar, missile approach warning systems, and countermeasures like chaff and flares.
To trick incoming missiles?
Precisely. Designed to decoy threats and, increase survivability.
Okay, so it's got the awareness, the defense. What about offense? What kind of punch does the JF-17 pack?
It can carry a pretty hefty payload, over 8,800 pounds of ordnance.
Wow.
And that allows for a diverse mix. Air-to-air missiles, like the PL-5 or the longer-range PL-12, for taking on other aircraft. Then, various air-to-ground munitions, including precision-guided bombs for accurate strikes. It can even carry anti-ship missiles, like the C-802.
Versatile indeed.
Very. And importantly, it's compatible with standoff weapons.
Meaning they can fire from further away.
Exactly. Launched from outside the range of enemy air defenses, which is much safer, plus laser-guided munitions for that pinpoint accuracy. And one more thing, it can be refueled in midair.
Extending its reach significantly.
Definitely adds to its operational flexibility.
So it seems like a capable, versatile platform. How does Pakistan actually position it within their Air Force strategy, and how many do they have?
Well, they've really positioned the JF-17 as you could say, the backbone of their fighter fleet now.
The main workhorse.
Absolutely. Numerically, they now significantly outnumber their American-supplied F-16s.
Really? How many?
The figures suggest over 140 JF-17s are in service, compared to maybe around 75 operational F-16s.
That's a big difference. Really underscores its importance to them.
It certainly does.
Okay, let's talk advantages then. What are the specific benefits for Pakistan in having the JF-17 as their main fighter?
I'd say the first big one is definitely affordability.
Cheaper than the alternatives?
Significantly cheaper, yeah. Compared to Western fighters like the F-16 or others, the JF-17 costs considerably less to buy and also to maintain over its lifetime.
And for Pakistan, with, budget constraints often being a reality.
It's a critical factor. Makes it a viable option. Secondly, as we touched on, that high level of indigenization.
Making it themselves.
Producing over 60% locally. That reduces reliance on foreign suppliers, shields them somewhat from, say, international sanctions or supply chain hiccups.
Right, builds that strategic autonomy we talked about.
Exactly. It aligns perfectly with their goal of being more self-reliant in defense. And finally, there's the export potential.
Selling it to other countries.
Yes, because it offers modern capabilities at a relatively attractive price, and often without the strict political conditions that sometimes come with Western arms sales.
The strings attached.
Right. That makes it appealing to certain developing nations. And we've already seen exports happen. Myanmar has bought them. Nigeria, too.
So cost, self-reliance, and exportability. Those are pretty compelling advantages, especially given Pakistan's situation. But, every piece of kit has its downsides. What are the key drawbacks or limitations we need to consider with the JF-17?
Well, one quite significant concern is that Reliance on the Russian Klimov RD-93 engine.
The engine, right. Why is that a vulnerability?
It creates a potential weak link in the supply chain. You have to consider the geopolitics, the ongoing tensions in the region, plus the historically very close relationship between India and Russia.
Russia being a major arms supplier to India.
Exactly. So relying on a Russian engine while potentially facing conflict with India, it raises questions about, spare parts, support, especially in a crisis.
Have they tried to find alternatives?
They have. There have been efforts to develop an indigenous Pakistani engine or find other sources. China's WS-13 engine is being evaluated as a potential replacement. But as far as we know, a reliable alternative isn't fully implemented across the fleet yet.
So that dependence remains a key issue.
It does. But perhaps the most critical limitation, especially if you're thinking about a potential war with India, is its perceived technological inferiority compared to India's top-tier fighters.
Like which ones?
Like the French Rafale jets India has acquired, or their Russian Su-30 MKIs. These are generally considered more advanced aircraft.
And the source, the national interest, was pretty blunt about this.
Very direct. They stated, and I'm quoting here, "But during a war with neighboring India, the JF-17 stand no match to India's more advanced European and Russian warplanes."
Wow. That's a stark assessment.
It is. It highlights a potential capability gap in a high-intensity conflict scenario.
And that kind of perceived weakness, I suppose, that could hurt its image elsewhere?
Absolutely. It could definitely impact its export market. If potential buyers see its limitations potentially exposed in a real conflict, well, that could certainly dampen its appeal.
Makes sense.
And beyond just the aircraft comparison, the overall assessment in the source suggests that even with the JF-17 making up the bulk of its fleet, Pakistan is unlikely to be able to achieve a conventional military victory against India.
Okay, so let's try and bring this together. When we look at the JF-17 Thunder, what are the core takeaways for understanding the military balance there?
Well, I think the JF-17 clearly stands as a symbol of Pakistan's real push towards building its own defense industrial base, reducing that external reliance.
Self-sufficiency.
Right. And it provides them with a relatively affordable and increasingly capable multi-role fighter that forms the backbone of their Air Force. That's undeniable. But it does face some crucial limitations. Most notably, that dependence on a foreign engine, specifically a Russian one, and the potential technological gap when compared head-to-head with the most advanced aircraft in the Indian Air Force.
And how does all this, the plane's existence, its capabilities, its limitations, how does it factor into the broader strategic picture between India and Pakistan?
Well, in that very tense geopolitical environment, between two nuclear-armed neighbors, air power is absolutely critical. It's a key part of the regional military balance. The JF-17 represents a very significant chunk of Pakistan's air power, giving them numbers. But its limitations, especially versus India's high-end fighters, that's a key factor analysts have to weigh when looking at potential conflict scenarios and the overall strategic stability or instability in South Asia.
So thinking about that reliance on the Russian engine and knowing the close, long-standing ties between Russia and India, it does raise a really interesting question, maybe something for you, the listener, to consider. What are the long-term strategic consequences for Pakistan's efforts to modernize its air force? And what does it mean for their partnerships beyond that strong link with China?
That's a really crucial point to reflect on, isn't it? Especially for those of you, perhaps, who follow international relations and strategic affairs closely. It just highlights that complex dance between technological dependence, military capability, and geopolitical alignments in a really sensitive part of the world.
Absolutely. And for those of you preparing for exams like the UPSC, understanding these kinds of details, the military tech, the strategic relationships, the regional power dynamics, it's absolutely essential.
Core knowledge.
Analyzing a platform like the JF-17 gives you a real-world case study. It touches on current events, strategic affairs, potential flashpoints, all directly relevant to your preparation. So definitely keep these kinds of analyses in mind as you follow what's happening globally.
Good advice.
Now, if you found this deep dive into the JF-17 insightful, please do take a moment to like, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment if you have further questions or thoughts.
Yeah, your engagement really helps us know what topics you find most interesting.
It does. And finally, we just want to clearly state again that the information we discussed today was drawn from the analysis published by the National Interest.